Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and whether we are ever getting back together. At a corner table by the fire are two people. One of them is trying to come up with another song reference, but he doesn't super duper know a lot of other ones. And that's me, Matthew Mellema, and welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. Now, as we all know, the first rule of the internet is don't anger the Swifties. The second rule of the internet is, seriously, don't anger the Swifties. So how did we reach this stage where Taylor Swift, that singer of high school love songs, has the largest and most powerful fan base in the world? I mean, she's the most popular musician since at least Michael Jackson. Well, maybe the most popular musician since the Beatles? How do we explain all this? Well, I'm going to be honest, I'm not exactly the right person to answer that question. This may come as a shock to some of you listeners, but I am not in Taylor Swift's target audience. Now, me and Taylor are in the same generational cohort, right? We're both millennials. I'm like 3 years older than her. So I was around when she burst onto the scene, but I'm going to be honest. I've never really listened a whole heck of a lot to Taylor Swift. I want to be very clear. Swifties, I want to be so clear. I do not dislike Taylor Swift, okay? So you're good. We are all good. We are all good. But I feel like I need an expert to explain to me the appeal of Taylor Swift. How has this person become the biggest superstar in the world? What is it about her songs? What is it about the storytelling power of her songs that so captures the zeitgeist of planet Earth? So when I'm trying to find the right person to explain this to me, I really did not have to look very far. I only had to look to my own cousin because, well, for several reasons. One of them is this cousin is, I think, very bright and very thoughtful on the subject. Yeah, that's right. I just gave you a compliment. It's okay. And second, she's always been there to just tell me how ridiculous I am for not acknowledging that what she reads and listens to is great. Let me give you an example. So we are 12 years apart. Yes, I'm very old and she is young. And I remember once when I was in college, I was riding in the car, like her dad, my uncle, he was giving me a ride, and she's like 6 or 7, and she starts telling me about this book series she's reading called Twilight. And again, this may shock you. I didn't know a whole lot about Twilight, and I was asking her about the vampires. And what she tells me, in this tone implying that I'm the biggest idiot for not knowing this, is that when vampires hit skin goes out into the sunlight, it, quote, shines with the light of 1,000 diamonds. Matt, my stupid cousin, how do you not know that? So with that, she has this look at me like she's going to contest the story. But anyway, with that, I introduce my cousin, the multi-talented Alyssa. Alyssa, how are you?
Good, thanks. I really, truly have no memory of this story that you're telling, but I do believe that it's true because you'd probably remember better than me. I don't have a great memory. And yeah, it sounds a little like me.
And you can confirm that vampires in the sun do shine with the light of 1,000 diamonds.
Yeah, according to Twilight, yes.
Okay, but we're not talking about Twilight. Come on, we're talking about something serious. Taylor Swift. We could, maybe the next episode. Yeah. So would it be fair to say that you are a Swiftie?
Yeah, I'm definitely not like the most knowledgeable Swiftie, but like in my friend group, I am the person who says, have you listened to this album? Have you listened to these songs before? And I do enjoy trying to get my friends to listen to Taylor Swift.
Okay, well, I will say when we started preparing for this episode, you asked if there's any stuff you need to send me. I was like, yeah, please send me homework. And listeners, she sent me so much in-depth research. It was really amazing. I was so impressed.
And I have more on my computer.
So what we're gonna do, because I'm guessing our listenership here is probably a mix. We probably have some hardcore Swifties. Maybe we have some who are like me, they just don't know what's going on. Maybe some who are Swiftie skeptical. Again, Swifties, not me. Not me. I think you all are great and the best. Okay. But for all of those people especially, I think what I want to do in this episode is explaining the storytelling power of Taylor Swift's music to the uninitiated. So, with that said, let's give your origin story. What first drew you to Taylor Swift?
Yeah, I would say that like I was a casual fan growing up. I heard, like our song Love Story, Teardrops on My Guitar, and definitely related to some of those as like a tween, early teen. Um, but I wasn't a major Swiftie until a little bit later on. I remember I enjoyed Red in 1989. I'd listened to it on the radio. Um, it wasn't until college I remember Reputation was coming out. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, some new music. But I still wasn't crazy into it until honestly around the pandemic when Folklore and Evermore were released. That's whenever I was like, whoa, this stuff is actually really good. And I started listening to some of her older stuff and realized, oh, I missed out on a lot of the maybe not radio hit singles, but like the rest of the albums. And then I got to be like a true fan waiting for Midnights and the Tortured Poets Department to be released.
So I'm glad you map that out, because that seems to map out with a lot of people too. Because one of the many things I find fascinating about this subject is that Taylor Swift's career arc is taking kind of a weird turn, right? Because she became a star when she was very young. I think she was like 16 when her first album came out. Is very popular. Second album came out a few years later, also very popular. So she was a star when she was like a teenager, but not like a super duper mega star, right? Like there were other bigger stars out there. It's only within the last, I want to say like 3 to 5 years, like maybe even since COVID, that I think she's gone from big star to the unquestioned biggest star in the world. Do you think that's roughly accurate?
I think that's, yeah, fairly accurate. Around the time that like 1989 came out, which I'm not sure when that was, but it was before I went to college, so a while ago. I think at that point she was like one of the pop icons for sure. But even since that, probably, yeah, around the time that Folklore and Evermore came out, I think she really showed that she could do multiple genres, not just country, not just pop, but also kind of more of a folk indie pop. And then that's whenever she started to become this like the star of our decade, perhaps some might say generation.
Some might say that.
I might.
Yeah, that is another really interesting thing too, because going back and preparing for this episode, I did listen to some of her old songs, and one of the things that struck me listening to like our song is her southern twang, the southern twang that this Pennsylvania girl has, and I found that interesting. But obviously, she doesn't use that anymore, really. I think sometimes she does for like effect, but she goes from being a country singer with maybe some pop elements. Then she seems to go to being a pop singer with maybe a few country elements, then a straight pop singer. Now she, like you said, she incorporates rock, indie. Now she's kind of hard to categorize in terms of genre. Again, that is my Philistine 30-something male perspective. Do you agree with me?
No, I think that's definitely true. I think it's interesting to look back even on like Speak Now. Listening to it now, you can hear like it's kind of country, kind of pop, but there's almost some pop punk influences there. And she was like good friends with, I think, Hayley Williams, this singer in Paramore, and still is now. And I think you can hear some of that influence even all the way back then in her, like third album. But yeah, now you've got her going a little bit more indie. I would say in her recent albums, she's returned a little bit more to mainstream pop, but occasionally bringing in like, in the Tortured Poets Department, she did bring back a few country elements for some songs. So she really, I think, mixes them well.
I heard that her twang made a reappearance. Is that true?
Yeah, and this is actually something I will defend in her. As I think the linguistic code switching, totally natural, totally normal. I kind of geek out on linguistics as well. And I personally, whenever I'm hanging out with my mom's side of the family, my Southern accent comes out a little bit more. I generally don't have one. Sometimes a little bit of a Northern or Midwestern accent comes out. So
That's true. You're a mixed region kid with a Southern mom and a Northern dad.
it's true.
You're right. You do code switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you basically, you and Taylor have this in common. You can bring out the twang if need be.
Yeah, exactly. We're basically the same person.
Okay. So let's start big picture before really delving into some particular songs. So why do you think that Taylor is the megastar? What is it about her that makes her so popular to so many people?
That's a good question. I think like there is the fact that so many of us grew up with her. She's releasing songs about being in high school as we're in high school. And then as she's growing into different phases, she's still releasing music and we're going through that with her. And she's also released so much music. She just has a lot of albums and also a lot of eras, which is something that, in the Taylor Swift lingo, it's not just the same kind of music. She's really shifting into different eras throughout her life. I think she's obviously a great singer, but it's her writing, I think, that really sets her apart, her storytelling and the way that people can really relate to her songs. And I think she also just has a certain star power as well, like charisma.
Okay, those are really good points and some very useful segues for the later part of our conversation. But before we get to that, I just want to flag a couple things with that too. First off, one question I have is, again, an ignorant, Philistine, because she becomes super duper famous when she's 16. Those songs are very much written from the perspective of, a high school girl. Do you think a lot of bands I've noticed, especially the ones who become famous when they're young and writing about young love, seem stuck in that rut, right? Like even when they're 45 years old and gross, they're still writing about young love. Do you think she has fallen into that rut at all? Or do you think she's been able to move past that?
I think there's an element of, I forget who said the quote, but you become stuck at the age that you become famous at. And I think there's a certain element to that for sure that you can see in some of her songwriting. And I think that even she might acknowledge in some of her songwriting about feeling stuck and not really growing up the way that most people normally do. I think that you definitely see some of her maturation in later songs. Like you get songs like Anti-Hero where she's like, I'm the problem, it's me, and dealing kind of with, the idea of self-loathing. You also get different types of songs processing things like grief or how to handle fame, which seem to be moving forward from the, classic Our Song or Hey Stephen, White Horse, some of the older teenage love drama things.
Yeah, and that leads to another point that you mentioned. And my theory of the case here is that the real core reason that Taylor Swift seems to stand head and shoulders above every other musician today is the fact that she very famously writes her own songs. That really sets her apart, especially in this sort of solo world, right? I mean, I'm thinking of so many others. Like in my day, back when I was in middle school, we had Britney Spears, right? Britney Spears had some things going for her. She was extremely beautiful. She had a good voice. Okay. But, she wasn't writing her own songs. NSYNC wasn't writing their songs. Backstreet Boys didn't write their songs. The songwriting computer wrote their songs, right? It's like an algorithm. And there's always this note of inauthenticity there, right? I'll admit, I'm a child of the 90s. There's some Backstreet Boys and NSYNC stuff I really like. But there's something like, I know I Want It That Way was written by, again, probably some Swedish dude who's really good at crunching numbers and using Excel spreadsheets or whatever. Whereas Taylor Swift writes her own material. And I think that is a huge bonus in helping her fans connect with her, making her seem more authentic. It just shows, frankly, she's much more talented than a lot of those other acts that I just said, all in all, right? She does have the performance aspect. She has the voice, the instruments, but she's also really great at creating music. So I think that's what sets her apart, especially in the area of storytelling. So that is the main point I want to go with going forward. So again, thank you for the great segue. It's like we're related or something.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So I'll hand the microphone over to you. What's a good song to start off with for again those who may be vaguely familiar with Taylor, but really don't know a whole heck of a lot? What's a good opening song to get an idea of her storytelling prowess?
Yeah, so I think if you're starting off in Taylor Swift, first of all, there's, the issue of genre, which could help you determine which songs to listen to. But if we're going purely based off of storytelling, it's so hard to choose one. I mean, All Too Well, 10-minute version, Taylor's version is great. There's even a short film that Taylor directed. It's just a great it's a great example of storytelling. But if you want something that's maybe less love story focused, you get some really great songs like I love The Last Great American Dynasty, where she's sharing the history of the house that she bought and the woman who owned it before her. And it's just so interesting. She's sharing history about a house, but making it a beautiful story and a beautiful song. There's also some like made up stories that you get in things like Champagne Problems. That's kind of a story that she created in her head about a rejected proposal. And I think that's really fun to listen to as well.
All right, so let's take that point by point. Then I actually have some in mind too. That's right, I did the homework.
Yay.
So let's start with All Too Well. I did listen to that. That was one of the assigned songs I did listen to. So this one, it's again, her version is 10 minutes long. It's very, very long. Lots and lots of lyrics here. I have the lyrics pulled up right now. There's a lot of them. And it seems to be basically her telling the story. Again, this is me on first listen and glancing through the lyrics right now. To my novice ear, it seems like she's talking about dating this older famous dude who turns out to be a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Am I missing something here? Give me the storytelling aspects that my Philistine ears are missing.
No, I think you're on it, but it's I think more than just dating an older famous dude, it's like something that a lot of people can relate to, like this story where maybe you're dating someone and it starts off, all rosy, but then as you go on, you realize that maybe they're not the person that you think that they are, and processing all of those feelings and emotions. Yeah, and I think within that she also it's the storytelling, and it's also like she uses so many metaphors. Like I love the line, "You kept me like a secret, but I kept you like an oath." And you call me, what is it? So you call me up again just to break me like a promise, so casually cruel in the name of being honest. She just has some great like metaphors within there that kind of make you feel like, oh yeah, that's how I feel, but I didn't have the words for it. But she puts it into words. So I think it's kind of, the tale as old as time, right? Like failed relationship, but she tells it in a way that makes it seem kind of new or relatable.
Interesting. Now you know the scuttlebutt here. Did she write All Too Well in reference to a particular ex, or do you think this came more from her imagined experience?
No, I think it's about Jake Gyllenhaal.
Ah, there we go. Well,
Yeah, Red was her first, and some would say like her only true breakup album, other than more recently the Tortured Poets Department. Yeah, Red was basically a breakup album.
Okay, so there we go. So how do you feel about that? Because one could say, again, I'm not saying this, Swifties. I think you're all brilliant. That there's something here where it seems like to me, skating over the surface here, that a lot of her breakup songs basically come down to her saying, the reason we broke up is because you suck. I'm doing great. You suck. It's your fault. Am I misreading that, or do you think that is a theme that is in there?
I think it's a theme in certain albums, certain songs. You also get songs though, like Back to December, which is in one of her earlier albums, which is basically an apology song to Taylor Lautner saying, I messed up in this relationship. You have in later albums, maybe as she's had a little bit more time to reflect and look back on old relationships, songs like Anti-Hero, where she says, maybe like I'm the problem. You also have one reference in one of her songs where she talks about her exes and says, now I send their babies presents. Kind of like, yeah, I've moved on. Like, we can move forward. There's certain exes that never really got bad songs written about them. There's some that it sounds like really kind of deserved some bad songs written about them.
Oh my. Okay, well, I have so many questions that are off topic, but all right. So now let's go. So All Too Well is like sort of a classic breakup song story. And again, I do want to emphasize to the listeners here, like this is really a story. It's a 10-minute story. A lot of there's so many breakup songs out there, right? And usually they're emotion, 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 hook, chorus, emotion, emotion. But this shares emotions, um, some very strong emotions, but in the context of setting like scenes, telling scenes from like their relationship. So that there's a narrative pull to that. So let's keep on going. Let's talk about that house song, which name I'm sure I knew just a little. The Last Great American Dynasty. How does she tell that in terms of a narrative?
Oh, I love that song because you don't know that. Sorry, I've spoiled it for you. You don't know that it's about her house until the end of the song. But instead, it's talking about this like heir to big oil money, and he marries this middle class divorcee, and everyone in town's like, how did she do this? How did she pull it off? And she's kind of a little bit raucous, maybe a bit of a partier. People are kind of looking down their nose at her, and then he ends up dying, and so she has the house, and everyone just is looking down their nose at her like, how is this middle class woman now owning this house? And it's the end of this great American dynasty. And it says like she had a marvelous time ruining everything, and then it goes on to talk about how the house sat quietly for 50 years, and then Taylor said, and then it was bought by me. And then she also ends it by saying, I had a marvelous time ruining everything. So she's drawing like these parallels between this woman that everyone was kind of looking down at and herself, who she's also maybe been accused of being a serial dater or partier or ruining everything, and people like to look down their noses at her. So drawing
Again, not us. We are not saying anything like that.
No, no, I haven't heard you say anything like that. Only open curiosity. But yeah, I think it's cool how she draws the parallels, and then kind of surprises you at the end with like, this is about me. This is about my house.
Okay. And is it about like her actual real life house, or is this like another like fiction?
No, this is like a real house that she owns.
Okay. Okay. So now song that I will admit I was very interested by is what's the right terminology here? I'm gonna go with the Cardigan trilogy. Is that right?
Yes. I don't actually know the proper way to call it, but yeah, the Betty Cardigan August, like 3-song love story.
Okay, so this is interesting. So what album was it on?
Folklore.
Okay, there we go. So it's on Folklore, which is one of her more recent ones. It was like what, 2020? Yeah, okay. So these are 3 separate songs on this album, but Taylor hinted that they all tell one story. Is that it?
Yeah, if you listen to them, you hear like a certain reference. Like in Betty, you hear a mention of a cardigan, and in August, you hear in Betty also you hear kind of mentions of the things that went down in the song August.
Okay, so walk us through this story. This story of teenage woe.
Yeah, so and again, I'm not the expert, but I and there's different interpretations, but I believe that Cardigan is telling about this girl who meets a boy. Her name's Betty. His name is James, and they're in high school and they meet, and he makes her feel like a cardigan that someone found and puts back on and says, "You're my favorite." So she feels special. Then August is the story from a different girl's perspective of a summer fling with a random unnamed dude, and how she wants it to kind of last forever, but it's only for a summer. You were never mine, is one of the lines in there. And then Betty is kind of where it comes together, and you hear James basically going to Betty's house to apologize for the summer that happened and to say, yeah, I spent my summer with her, but I was thinking of you the whole time. And kind of apologize, kind of not apologize, but still beg for her to take him back.
Okay, and again, there's nothing explicit that connects all those 3 songs. I think she hinted in like an interview that 3 of her songs were connected, but she didn't say which ones they were. So the Swifties put these together. So when you add them together, we have this whole love triangle where Cardigan is Betty, the first girl, and then August is the unnamed other woman.
People call her Augustine in this Taylor Swift world because, obviously August.
I've also seen that some Swifties call her Una, short for unnamed.
Oh, I haven't heard that. Look at you.
Look at me doing my homework. So, we add them together. We have the spurned, like, steady girlfriend who's, made to feel special. Again, this is first love, teenage love, picture two high schoolers. Then does James like, I'm sorry, I'm just getting into the weeds of the lyrics here. Does he cheat on her, or does he like dump Betty for Augustina?
It's not super clear. I think it's mentioned in one of the songs that maybe he saw Betty talking with another guy and kind of assumed the worst. And so kind of leaves her for the summer to spend with this girl. So breaks up, I think. But then wants her back.
Oh, okay.
Not super clear though.
And so that part is interesting, right? 3 separate songs from 3 different points of view, 3 narrators. Another thing I found interesting is the time frame for them. So the Betty character in Cardigan in the Una/Augustina character in August are reflecting back on this as like adults. So they're like looking back at it, whereas James is narrating it sort of in the moment as a very immature 17-year-old. So that lends a whole nother layer to it, where you can sort of see how Betty seems to have this more detached, a little more wisdom looking back at the relationship, where James, it's all raw, untrained emotion.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that before, but that is interesting how she plays on the different tenses and what that could be saying about James and where he's at, maybe stuck, or I don't know. It's interesting.
I just make points about Taylor Swift sometimes. It's no big deal.
Yeah,
but
well done.
So I also want to talk a little bit about whether you think the narratives have changed with her over the years. Again, she's only 34, but she's been in the public life for well over half her life. And obviously the stories she was telling when she was 16, they're about, high school crushes, unrequited love. What was that one about? She wishes.
You belong with me.
Yeah, that one. Thank you. Yeah. So do you think that she's, again, repeating these same themes, or do you think the storytelling methods and subject matter have matured as Taylor has matured?
I definitely think they have. I think both her methods, like you see a lot of literary references in her songs that go way over my head. And then, also the topics, the messages. There's still, like, on her most recent album, she had a song called So High School, where she's talking about a guy that makes her feel so high school, Travis Kelce, which that's a whole nother topic that we could get into later.
Oh, we will. Don't worry.
Yay, good. But yeah, she
Wait,
also...
no, you keep going. I have a question I really want to ask, but you keep going.
Okay. She also covers a lot of different topics. Like she has songs about politics. She has songs about grief and loss. She has a song specifically about losing her grandmother, more songs just generally about grief, reflecting on her growing up and aging and what that looks like, her relationship with herself. And then also in Folklore and Evermore, she described it as how, like, all of her other albums had been very self-reflective, and these were worlds and stories that she was creating, like fictional. So I think that she's really expanded in the different topics that she writes about now.
Well, that is very good to hear, because I always cast a side eye at any artist. Again, I'm throwing no shade at the Swifties. You're amazing. Where you're always afraid that the artist is going to get in that rut. It's like, all right, talking about teenage love, even though I'm 48 years old and have a hernia. But that is really great to see the maturing of the themes. And I'm just very curious, because I want to start asking about Travis Kelce. So High School, is that a positive song about him?
Yeah. It's basically saying that he makes her feel like she's in high school again, like all the butterflies, the giddy feelings.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one line that I love from there is, truth dares spin the bottle. You know how to ball. I know Aristotle, which is just so funny. It's kind of, calling on the classic jock and the nerd. But now they're all grown up, but he's still kind of the jock and she's still kind of the nerd.
Definitely. Let me also say, and was it her most recent album? She had that song Cassandra that I appreciated as a Greek mythology nerd myself. Cassandra is one of my favorite figures in Greek mythology. So she is in the Aeneid, where she is one of the princesses of Troy, and the god Apollo gives her the gift of prophecy. Apollo, god of prophecy, and Apollo, however, viewed this sort of as a quid pro quo, if you get my meaning. Cassandra did not, so spurns Apollo's advances. So Apollo curses her. The curse is so interesting because she still has prophecy and prophesizes the truth, but nobody believes her. Such an interesting concept that we get from the Aeneid, and she used it. She put a twist on it. Part of my nerd brain was like, that's not quite what happened to Cassandra, but the overall point was I thought it was very good use of Greek mythology. So good on you, Taylor. So now we're running low on time, but I need to ask. So I am one of the very few people. Well, there's several of us dudes. Your husband is in the room with us. He's probably in the same camp as me. Where when Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce started their relationship, I knew a lot more about Travis Kelce because Travis Kelce is one of the best tight ends in the NFL and had been for some time when they started dating. I knew vaguely that Taylor dated a string of like pale emotional artists, I didn't think much of any of them, to be honest with you. But Travis, I will say, even though he plays for the Chiefs, my least favorite team, when I look at Travis Kelce, my caveman brain sort of looks at it as like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Because Travis Kelce, he's big, strong dude. He's handsome and in like this brutish way. I think I told you earlier. He looks like a sexy caveman, sort of. But he's a famous athlete, again, one of the best players in the NFL. He was on SNL and was super funny, so he's cool, he's funny. My caveman brain, like, okay, the big, strong, handsome athlete who's cool and funny, that makes sense. The pale, tortured artist kid wearing the big sweaters doesn't. So that's how I feel as, again, a Philistine dude. How did you feel when Taylor got with Travis Kelce?
Slightly surprised, like I think most people probably felt, but my thought was I hope they're happy. Like, and he seems very, like you said, different from the other types of guys that she's dated in the past. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe, not to quote another song of hers, but
I'll do it. That's the whole thing.
With Joe Alwyn, who she was with for a very long time, she said, "How long could we be a sad song?" And they're both just very emotional, artistic people. And sometimes you maybe need a little bit more of a balance than someone who matches that energy. And I think that Travis could really be like the golden retriever, fun loving, keep things light, like the energy to balance her out. So I wish the best for them. I hope that they're happy.
I don't mean this as an insult because I think Travis Kelce is a smart dude. But he doesn't strike me as an overly complicated guy, so, so I think that could be a good thing to offset the tortured artist, right?
Perhaps, yeah.
And also, so I just watched this whole relationship develop with fascination over the NFL season, right? Again, selfishly, Swifties, please forgive me. I meant this only in football terms. I was hoping that they would break up right like during the NFL playoffs and then Travis Kelce's play would tank and the Chiefs would lose. That did not happen, which I've reconciled myself to. He still played well. But watching Taylor go to the game, seeing the Swifties' reaction to all this stuff, some Swifties learning the rules of football just so they could better support Taylor's boyfriend, it was fascinating. Mm-hmm. Like the first time she was in like the box, like the executive box at the stadium with like Travis's mom, and there's like rumors like, oh, I heard that from the caterer she got a chicken tender with ketchup to dip it in, and all the Swifties like, oh my gosh, whoa, that's I'm like, wow, I don't understand this world at all, but I'm fascinated.
To be fair, I don't think the Swifties really cared about the single chicken tender. I think, like how annoying must that be to be famous and like you're just going to watch a football game and, everyone's keeping track of like what you're eating and who you're talking to. I think, it's more just, oh, cool. Like this is a little glimpse into her life. She was very private for a very long time. And then now she is stepping out into the public eye a little bit more. People are curious. They want to see.
I will say I respected the way that She was very visibly and legitimately cheering for the Chiefs and
Yeah.
Travis Kelce. Like she's standing up, cheering, fist pumping, shouting. Respect. That seemed very genuine.
Yeah, it was clear that she wasn't there to try to get attention, and also she doesn't need to try to get attention. Like, she doesn't have to look for it. It's there. If anything, she probably just wants to enjoy a football game.
So again, I apologize, but as a football fan and just someone who's interested by this, do you think they're going to get married?
I hope so.
Okay, I do too. I'm rooting for those two crazy kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard someone else point out that the best that let's there's the very cold business take where this was undisputably great for both of their careers, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest stars in the NFL, Taylor Swift, be the two remaining vestiges of the old monoculture, right? The two biggest entities in America
If we had a monarchy.
dating. Yes, they would be our king and queen.
Yeah, they took a picture with Prince William, I guess.
Yeah, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's huge for William.
Yeah.
What a coup for him."
For him.
So it is good for their crew, but on a human level, I really do. I enjoy, as again, this 30-something dude, I enjoy seeing them together. I hope they make it. And also, if they get married, they have a few kids, this would be very fascinating for Taylor Swift's music, singing about motherhood and those sort of things.
Yeah.
What do you think would happen if this, assuming this advances?
I'm really excited to see what kind of music we get out of her in the future. Just as, you look at and maybe this is strange to compare, but some of the music we got when she was in a long-term relationship was really beautiful. So to see what kind of music could come out of a marriage and having children, she wrote one song on the Tortured Poets Department called Robin, and that was dedicated to, I think, Aaron Dessner's kid. I'm looking to my husband, yeah. Aaron Dessner just had a child, and so she wrote this song dedicated to the baby, and it was just a really sweet song. So I think that is maybe even a picture of the types of music that we could get from her in the future as she continues to grow.
And I heard someone else say this too, and it's so true. Can you imagine if she writes like a lullaby for her infant child? How popular that would be?
You could have a whole album created for moms, to lull your children to sleep.
My goodness, Amazon might catch smoke. It would be so popular. But so again, I could talk about Travis and Taylor all day, and I'm refraining because I'm a disciplined podcast host. But let's look forward into the future. Okay. Because again, Taylor's been in our lives for a long time, but she's only 34, right? Like she still could have a whole lot of music left in her. So where do you see her going moving forward? Like as she hits 40, 50, 60, do you think she's going to be still creating? How do you see that all turning out?
Yeah. Well, we're still waiting for Reputation Taylor's version. So, that's got to come sometime. Yeah, I see her, if I could predict the future, continuing to put out music for a good long while. She's made it clear that it's something she really enjoys doing. And I think she's mentioned in interviews before that it's just what she likes to do. She kind of can't help but create music. And as long as people want to listen to it, I think she'll continue to put it out. So I think we could have a lot more music from her. Maybe someday she'll decide to just retire and try to find a quiet life, see the lakes on Folklore. Maybe she'll go off and just hide in the Lakes District and have a quiet, peaceful life. But I think we'll get some more music from her.
You know who I think should be her model going forward? Who's another great singer-songwriter who's still in the public eye? Dolly Parton.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because Dolly Parton's still relevant. Mm-hmm. You see her performing every now and then. You're like, oh my gosh, she's 80. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And she's still, again, like Taylor, super talented singer-songwriter. Still, I get the feeling 50 years from now, I'll be in my retirement home, be like, is that Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl on Mars?
Yeah, and I think also just doing good as well. Like Dolly Parton, does a lot of good for the world around her. Her book club for kids and stuff. And yeah, Taylor Swift on her Eras tour, she gave out $100,000 bonuses to each of her truckers. It's not industry standard for backup musicians to have any benefits or insurance, but hers do. I could just see her wanting to kind of quietly do good in the world and maybe occasionally perform. But yeah, I think Dolly Parton is a very good model of what that could look like.
All right. And did you know that Dolly Parton wrote I Will Always Love You and Jolene on the same day?
That's insane.
Wow. Taylor, gives you something to shoot for. I think you can do it, Taylor. I think you can do it. All right. So, go ahead.
Sorry, I do have a question for you if I'm allowed to.
Okay.
If I'm allowed to do this, I don't know.
Yes.
Take the reins. Of the songs that you listened to, which was your favorite? And also, do you think you'll be listening to Taylor at all in the future?
That's a good question because it's so hard for me because I have this association of Taylor, breaking on the scene when I was in college, right? So I kind of view the songs I know the most are the ones that are like on the radio when I was in college. So I know that I don't know I don't know the titles of the song.
Sing it for us.
Romeo, take me, blah, 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 I'll be. It's a love story, baby, just say yeah. So that has been in my head all day today. I'm not going to lie. I don't know. I will certainly give it a listen, especially if she and Travis get married. I'm obviously going to be listening to all the songs she writes about that. But I do find it really impressive what she's been doing recently. I find her fascinating, and I did enjoy listening to a lot of the music that you sent me as homework.
Yay.
I legitimately thought that the whole Cardigan trilogy was a really interesting narrative tool, so I enjoyed that one a lot. So to the extent that someone who is so not in her target audience can appreciate it, I do appreciate a lot of those aspects.
Nice. I'm glad to hear it. My goal is not to make everyone love Taylor Swift. Sometimes it's just not your thing, and that's fine. But I like when people can still appreciate her and her work.
Yeah, and how about this? Closing thought. Let's say someone again, they want to listen to a Taylor album. If you have to pick one album just for someone who wants to get to know Taylor, what would you recommend?
Okay. If you're not into Taylor, I'm going to assume that you've heard the early stuff, kind of like you were saying, Matt. You've heard all that, and maybe it didn't really jive enough with you to keep on continuing listening. So I would probably direct you away from the more country or pop that you're used to hearing towards folklore, because that is a lot of people's gateway into Taylor Swift. That my husband, who's sitting over here, he wasn't much of a fan, and then folklore came out, and he actually has some Taylor Swift songs on his on repeat current playlists these days. So I think that if you're not super into the country or the pop that you've heard from her before, give folklore a try.
Baby, just say. All right, that is great to hear. Thank you so much, Alyssa. I think that is a very good recommendation. Thank you so much for opening the world of Taylor Swift to an ignorant Philistine like me. And listeners, as you can probably guess, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The customers are trundling home, dancing a little jig to Love Story, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believed to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have 30 seconds or so to spare, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.